Good day, ladies and gents. This is the Ecclesiarch here, back with the next episode of the FORGECAST series, and of course, I am here with none other than BJ the Brave. BJ, say hi.
Hi. Back by popular demand, I hear, Ecclesiarch. Popular
Indeed,
demand.
indeed. People have given us a very good feedback on this podcast. Apparently, a lot of people have been enjoying this, and if that is what they wish, then we shall deliver.
Dude, the orcs have been smashing down my front door, beer flowing out of the tankers. Give me more Forgecast. So, we gotta
Yeah,
we we live in an orc world at the minute, apparently. So we gotta go with the meta. Give
yep.
the meta what they want,
Yeah,
what it
boss.
wants.
Yeah, give me more podcast. Wow. And here we are. Here we are, gentlemen. Here we are.
Guy with weird name.
It is what it is.
Feed me podcast. Yeah, no, it was cool. It was a good episode. I think people enjoyed it, and I mean, I know, like, from other games I've played and stuff, like you a podcast is like a staple of the community. It's quite a good thing to just kind of keep up with the news, keep up with like the meta, what's going on. What it's interesting to hear what people have been playing. I'm sure we'll get into all of that. So yeah, it's good to see you.
And good to see you too.
So what have we? It was a week and a half ago, was it? We did episode one, so we've had about 10 days. I know we've made a lot of videos and stuff. We can talk a bit about that, but yeah, let's dive right in. So what have you been playing in the world of not even just Warpforge, but I know you play related games as well. So yeah, what have you been playing?
Well, I haven't been playing like too much Warforged lately, simply because I kind of almost finished gathering the cards, and right now I'm just waiting for future changes and updates. Plus, I was really consumed by Rogue Trader lately, and
Yeah,
the other day also by like the poll that I made. People demanded the Legion stream, so I played a little bit of Horus Heresy Legions. uh,
nice.
I've been enjoying Rogue Trader like crazy, so definitely more streams coming up on that as well. I still do have to do a Warforged stream before New Year because there's some free packs to give away and stuff like that, so definitely more Warforged content coming up. But when it comes to Warforged itself, I've mostly been enjoying Chaos for the most part, so just have not been able to get off Chaos lately. I don't know why, but having a lot of fun playing it. So that's what has been going on my end for the most
And you made a
part.
and you did a chaos video guide to that, and it was really interesting because at the start of the season, I was trying to ask people, Abaddon, obviously the big change, how's everyone getting on with him? And no one really seemed to have anything that was sort of doing more than 50%. And I think your deck might be the best Chaos build people have made so far. How many games have you now played with it, and have you kind of been tracking the sort of win rate and stuff like that?
So basically, have been tracking it like with a
Mm.
spreadsheet simply because there's no like in-game tracker yet. I have like around 100 games with Abaddon right now. I haven't been
Wow.
playing after that. I stopped like at 100, then I moved to like Warp Trader. But when I was at 100 games, I was around, I believe, like 73, 74% win rate, which is pretty
Okay.
good. For
It's
the most
amazing.
part, like what I could say is like I had many matchups, and what I pretty much saw was that the Necron matchups seem to be very easy. Like I beat most Scarabs and I beat most Emotex. Don't seem to be struggling against Emotex a lot. I'm not sure if that's because the Emotech quality is low on the ladder or just this is a good matchup right now for Abaddon. But in general, I've been having a good time against Necrons. Against the Orcs, I would say 50-50 for the most part, even against Gaskell. There are some
Good,
days when
right?
I beat all the Gaskells, and there are some days that I just get smashed.
Yeah.
When it comes to the other warlords, though, it usually is a bit easier. Gruk can be very tricky, but Zaxtruk is just way too easy for Abaddon, I think. When it comes to the Eldar, I would say once again, like a little bit of a 50-50 there. I think maybe like 60-40 more in favor of Abaddon. I mean, I'm talking about like how I've been doing. I'm not sure if in general that matchup goes like that. When it comes to Chaos Mirrors, I think I've been winning like 90% of them, mostly because
Mm.
people have been running that Black Crusade, which is pretty cool. I'm actually making a Black Crusade video
Oh,
as
nice.
like as we speak, like it's in progress in general. But the thing is that in when it comes to like mirror matchups, my Abaddon, which is more early mid game focused, kind of wins out because by the time the enemy is at the Black Crusade, they've already pretty much been put down to like lethal range. And as you know, like I run a pretty high lethal range Abaddon deck with some combos, so it usually works.
Mm.
When it comes to Tyranids, that's a very tricky part. I've been losing the most games against Tyranids because there doesn't seem to be too much I can do against the Stealth Synapse one. Like, unless
Mm-hmm.
I get like a Heldrake Assault and instantly just take out the Broodlord, it's usually one shot, so it's very difficult to deal with it for me. Ultramarines seem to be pretty easy though. So I would say
And you
mostly I've
don't
been
run
losing versus
execute either,
Tyranids.
do you? So you can't deal with like the tyrannies getting when they get big as easy.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult because I do not run execute currently on my deck. But the thing is, the biggest problem is mostly the stealth because once like a big stealth unit drops, it becomes very difficult. So I would say like the hardest matchup I'm actually been having with Abaddon would be Swarmlord. It's
Right.
funny
Yeah.
enough, it
Yeah.
is the hardest matchup for me
That
right now.
makes sense. That makes sense. So what 100 games, that's a really good win rate. What how does the deck win in your opinion? And also you said about Necrons feeling quite easy. Like what why is it doing so well against Scarabs? Kind of like a double barrel
So
win condition question.
let me tell you, yeah, when I was playing Emotech, like I managed to keep myself in the top 50. Like I was around the 40th spot from 40 to 30. Then I
Mm.
dropped out because I haven't been playing lately, but I think by the end of the season I'll still try to climb up there. So it's been doing pretty well overall, just keeping sticking me in the top 50 still. Not being able to get past 30 while I was playing it, but then again I was not playing a lot either. So there's also that. But when it comes to the matchup,
Mm.
I'll tell you what the win condition in general is. My deck, the thing about my deck that I think is really good, it runs multiple win conditions, right? Number
Mm.
one thing that I have there is the Demonic Frenzy. I run one copy. That means that as soon as like a unit goes out of control with Marks of Chaos or Dark Pacts, as we call them, you can just one shot the enemy with that. Like usually you can deal up to 20 damage. That's the usual Chaos win condition, right? But on top of that, I do run a copy of Murderous Desires. And I do believe that that card has been like the key for me ever since I started running that card, I started winning games with Chaos because that gives you an insane lethal range. Because, for
Yeah.
example, I've done up to 30 damage with that, and even without like units, your Abaddon itself can do really well with Drachnian, and on top of that, you have the Legacy of Hatred or Legacy of Vengeance, what it's called.
Vengeance.
Yeah, that is a very good card against the Orcs, for example, because they suddenly fill up the board. Boom, you take like 10 damage. With you get 10 damage with that card, and then you deal 20 with Murderous Desire. So that's the second win condition, which brings up that to a very high level, the lethal range. I would say the
Mm.
third win condition for that would be, surprisingly enough, Leorvine Urkis. It's not like the most reliable win condition because it usually gets removed, but in a scenario where it survives or gets hit
Yeah.
by like Skins of Fate, it can just deal insane amount of damage in a single
Yeah.
turn. And there's always the Dark Apostle, which I would still consider as like the less reliable win condition because mostly it's gonna get destroyed instantly. But in a scenario where it doesn't, it's gonna be very scary. So you have multiple win conditions, and I think giving yourself the more reliable win condition, which is the one-shot combo, is exactly what makes this deck playable. Because as I said, like Demonic Frenzy, Dark Apostle, Lyran, Urkis, it still requires setup. While with this thing, you pretty much just need to get like Legacy or Drachnian going, and then you can just combo yourself to victory.
Do you mulligan hard for those win conditions, or are you mulliganing more just for kind of a smoother curve?
So here's what it is. I never mulligan Drachnian, like impossible. I always leave it in my hand because having that on curve can be devastating.
Mm.
If I have a matchup with like opponents that swarm, like scarabs or orcs, I always hard mulligan to get either traitors, hate, I believe that's how it's called, and
Yeah.
spawn them. Those
Spawn them.
two are like crucial to get.
Yeah.
So you hard mulligan to get those cards.
Yeah.
Against every other faction, you can even switch spawn them. Like if I play against Demotech, I don't leave spawn them in my hand. I try to mulligan for Drachnian or mulligan for stuff like Warp Talons. And Warp Talon is an underestimated unit. Like if you don't run Warp Talon in your Abaddon deck, yeah, you're missing out. That unit
Yeah.
is like a win condition on its own. Like you drop a
Yeah.
6 damage unit, just it's absolutely crazy. Plus it's stealth. And right now with no anti-stealth existing in this game, stealth units are pretty powerful.
Yeah. It's. I mean, I've run your deck a little bit, and it's. I think the Warp Town's brilliant, and almost insane when you break it down for what you get for 4 energy. But you know, Chaos seem to have like amazingly stacked 4 drops, and to the point that
Yeah,
you don't run some of the best cards in the faction. You never run because you can't just have a deck full of 4 drops. But it's like all the 4 drops are really good. Like
they're super.
Chosen, Sparing Champ. These would be auto includes in other factions. But yeah, and so okay, so traitors and Hay and Spawndom is how you is your answer to the scarabs. That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, you've obviously mainly been playing um, the Chaos. What else did you say you have played anything else really on ladder, or
Just
have
a
you just
little
basically?
bit of Eldar, which kind of didn't go too well for me because right now I'm not too good at playing Eldar, so I kind of dropped
Mm,
a bit on the rank because of that. But I've been trying some Keltalk lately, trying to build a decent control deck, which is
nice.
well working. Honestly, it's pretty good. Eldar, I would say, like are right now the most balanced faction overall.
Yeah,
They don't
I think.
feel weak or they don't feel strong. I would say that's like that faction is in the ideal spot. And
Yeah,
before
I
like we
agree.
continued, like there was one more thing I forgot to answer. So you asked specifically about the Emotech matchup. So Emotech matchup usually goes like this. The problem with Emotech against Chaos is that Emotech has does not really have a lot of tools to deal with you as soon as you get the Pact of Fate on your units because his tactics become useless, and then he has to rely on his Doom Sights and what's it called again, Scorpex. And unless Emotech has like a really good hand with Scorpec into Reconstruction Protocol, into another Scorpec, and so on, you end up kind of holding the early game. And as soon as you drop like a Warp Talon, Emotech tends to take a lot of damage like out of the bat. Like right off the bat, he takes a lot of damage. And then usually he is down into the situation where I can just one shot him. The only way that game goes very sour is if he like gets a very good curve, like drops a Praetorian, drops a like a Psychomancer, drops a Lich Guard, then drops something, and then suddenly he plays Tomb World. Then it becomes almost impossible. But that's usually not
Yeah.
the case because Necrons do not have card draw, so there it's not really that expected that he will have such a good thing. But if there's ever like a Oricon control, Oricon is very fragile, so you can just blow him up before he can even do anything.
Yeah, yeah, that's the problem with the 35 health units, isn't it? Okay, so for those people who don't know, you also, you know, were a streamer and played Everguild's earlier game, which is the Horus Heritage Legions. We talked a little bit about that in episode 1. If you haven't listened to episode 1 of the podcast yet, go back and check that out. It's only a couple, not even 2 weeks old, so it's all still very relevant stuff. But yeah, so I mean, how do you think Warforged is shaping up, like in comparison to Legions? I saw you'd gone back and played a stream this week, so you've played a bit more. Like, what's the balance in like, for example? What are some of the
Hmm.
things that you think kind of like they're doing better in Warforged or that you're excited about?
Okay, the thing is, right now, what really Warforged lacks is the factions. Because you only have six factions. It becomes stale very quickly because Warforged right now also lacks the neutral system, which Horus Heresy Legions had. Like, as I mentioned, there were three neutral factions, right? So, right off the
Yes.
bat, like, even though Horus Heresy Legions, I believe, started with four factions only, there were also neutrals, so you could build, like, these four factions very differently from each other, right?
Right, right.
And
That's a big difference, isn't
yeah,
it?
is this thing like yesterday I streamed Horus Heresy Legions and I played Alpha Legion. I was kind of disgusted at how overpowered it was, but here's the thing. I went to the ladder after I played a draft with Alpha Legion and I played some Korax, I played some Agents of Sigilite, I played some Horus Lupercal, and like it was fun because there were so many different things I could play. Like I was asking the stream, okay, guys, what do I play? And I was switching in between warlords, and all three warlords that I named there, they're totally different from each other. So I had this like a lot of fun playing Corvus Corax and so on. So the thing is, right now, what Warforged is lacking is content. Like it needs like more
Mm,
factions and it needs more things. It needs some quality of life updates. Like for example, it needs like the win rate system there. Maybe it could use the graveyard there. And I know what the plan is. I think I'm guessing what the plan is. There's not going to be no neutrals, but there's going to be sub factions, like as we mentioned last time,
you said
for
this last
orcs.
week, didn't you?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
Goth Clan and Snake Bites and something. Probably that's how it's going to work, but until we get there, it's going to be a little difficult. However,
Mm,
when it comes to how it's shaping up, I do want to say that EG is more engaged in this game, I think, with the community than the previous one. They have also been seem to be taking some balanced things into account. Even though like I do not like how the orcs turned out, they did take some like I think the community, for example, some part of the community was demanding that the Lich Guard get the attack reduced by one, and they did exactly that. And I think they've started listening to the community a little bit more. There was also I think that goes the same with Horus Heresy Legions actually because uh, we had the card reveals for Alpha Legion the other day, and got to reveal like an epic card, which was Praetor Tkeln or something like that. And it had a ridiculous rally. It had like rally, make an opponent return a card into the deck. Like it was absolutely nuts because it would see your hand and then make you drop a card, which was nuts. And like I even said on my like reveal that please EG don't do that, and they actually changed it. So I think I don't know if they did that because they listened to the feedback or they understood it themselves, but I think they've been more engaged lately. And honestly speaking,
Yeah.
Horus Heresy Legions has been having big difficulties in terms of balance, especially the last two factions, Iron Warriors, Alpha Legion, are just absolutely crazy. So I think compared to that, the Warforge balance is quite fine, I would say.
God,
Like,
that's scary.
it's pretty scary. We've
Do you
had
think that
some.
do you think, I mean, it'd be great to get, if anyone's listening from Everguild, you're welcome on the podcast. It would be great to have someone come and join Ecclesia and I, and a
That
little
would
bit
be
of
amazing.
discussion. But I wonder whether they'd be open. So one of the things Gwent did is and it's not just Gwent. I think a lot of the other CCGs have done something similar, but I really feel like they could leverage a particular keen part of the community to kind of play test upcoming patches. So what used to happen in Gwent, which I was a part of, is that they say a patch was coming in, I don't know, February. What they'd do is in the start of January they'd create a like a test server and invite a very limited but dedicated part of the player base who would basically get access to the test server. Not for long at all. Maybe 3-4 days. They play it intensely, and then obviously CD Projekt Red would then get all that feedback, right? They get all the data, all the wins, they get bug reports, they get kind of subjective, comments and feedback, and then that just gave them this kind of 3 week period to just polish before things went live. I wonder whether EG would be kind of like open to that because there's only so many people in the workforce, and it's difficult with something like a CCG. It's really difficult to kind of like understand like game balance and stuff. And generally, the broader audience you've got, obviously, the better the data is about balance and stuff. So I don't know. I just wonder whether they'd be open to some sort of like something like that, some sort of test community. I think it'd really help the game.
I think it would be very healthy for the game, obviously, because like a player test environment is present in a lot of games in general, and
Yeah,
I think like that would be perfect for Warforge. That would be a chance for Warforge to do right in what Horus Heresy Legions did wrong, which is engage the player base and listen to the player base. Like they could decide like who they're involving. Like they could involve like either top players or they could involve content creators as well and so on. They could like have a team of players who would basically just go there and test it and just give some feedback. Like I'm not saying like listen to all the feedback that the players give, but they would actually have something to work with. They would have like they would have something in their hands to just then like polish their game, as you said. I think having a test environment would help this game out tremendously.
for sure, for sure. Yeah, I can't, I'm still very optimistic, but I agree they're going to need to start putting the foot on the accelerator the first quarter of this year, and giving giving the game a little bit more. It's hard because people like you and I, obviously, we probably play the game a lot more than the average gamer, especially the kind of casual, sort of perhaps mobile phone gamer. You know what I mean? Like it, for us, it feels like we just want more. We want more. I don't know how that feels to everybody else, but for me, like I'd really love to see, yeah, some of those things. I love your idea about like Necrons having like this a pool that then you can have the Celtic Empire, but you can have different empires within the Necrons that can pull on that. I think that would be super cool.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, yeah,
I think they definitely. I just believe that they have something like that coming. Like
Mm.
I don't doubt that for a second. Unless if that wasn't the case, they would not call it Saltec Dynasty. They would call it Necrons. So I'm
Yeah,
sure that they have something like that for all the factions. Like
sure.
and I for one, e.g. give me Sisters of Battle like very soon, and give me Gojay Van Dyer, man.
Oh
I
man,
want to
this
see
battle.
Gojay Van Dyer available in the game.
I love like a faith point system. That would be super cool.
oh,
I'd love to see what they do with that. Yeah.
Oh, you're saying a scary thing there, yeah, PJ. I'll tell you why. That's a third resource or a second resource. I mean, we had two of those in Horus Heresy Legions. One was psychic power, psychic energy for Thousand Suns, and plasma for the Knights. It's very hard to balance that out. But actually, like, hate me if you want Horus Heresy Legions players, but I think Thousand Suns right now are. I know they're annoying to play against, but they're like, I think, much more bearable than they used to be. Like when they had two Psycho. Right now, whenever I play against them, except one specific Warlord that they have, it's always a little bit enjoyable and it's
Mm.
always nice. Though
I
I
always
do,
love
and
that.
yeah, go on.
I, I always love that kind of like it's a bit like the Eldar Spirit Stones, though, isn't it? Where now for them, often you something has to die, and then you collect the stone, and it's putting an
Mm-hmm.
investment in the bank that you can use later. And like you say, I think Eldari right now are probably one of the most balanced factions. They're really good. Um,
Absolutely.
but you can, I'd quite like to see maybe the faith-based system, the sisters would work well, where it's almost rather than a death wish ability, it's more like proactive. So maybe I play a card for 4 energy that is underpowered. You know, it's the stats wise, it's not
But it
very
gives
good for
faith.
4, but it gives me the faith point, so I can kind of trade those in, but it's more guaranteed. Whereas obviously the spirit stones are kind of based on, well, does the opponent kill the stone or not? But anyway, we're getting very carried away. Let me talk about what I've been playing this season.
Let's go.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I've played a lot this season, and obviously being an Orc player last season and seeing the changes, I've been loving playing the Orc faction. And you know, I know people might be skeptical about, oh, you're playing the meta, and it's like, yeah, but the interesting thing about the Orcs this season is that what is the meta deck? Somebody show me what the Orc meta deck is. It doesn't exist. I can tell you, I know. I've been in as high as rank 7 this season, and I know the top Orc players what they're playing, and everyone's playing something different. It's crazy. It is Gazgul that is meta. I'm not saying it isn't, but the builds themselves range from a kind of like a slower play Gazgul build where they're not attacking face and or a mech synergy Gazgul to an all-out kind of like smash face, go all in. Some are running green horde strategies, which obviously mean running the Storm Boys and the Slugger Boys, and some aren't. So the meta, even within Gazgul, is very varied, and it's been cool from a deck building point of view. I've played probably about 15 different Gazgul lists, and I've played Gruck lists as well this season. So one of the things that I just dropped actually, literally a few days ago, was my a video where basically I played 100 games with 2 different Orc decks, and I kind of tracked all of the win rates on a spreadsheet and kind of showed the results of that, and that was pretty cool, and I climbed pretty high with that. But at the same time, I kind of like I really wanted from a content. You know, you and I are content creators, and from a content point of view, I wanted to play some more creative decks as well. And I have to say, actually, Ecclesiarch, like one of my biggest kind of frustrations with the game at the minute, and something that really just sapped my enthusiasm to play, which is a real shame because I really love this game, is that when you're playing ladder, it really doesn't incentivize experimentation. It doesn't incentivize creativity. So, for example, I played, like I say, orcs, and I got up quite high very early on. And then you're in this position where if you play other decks and you start experimenting, even if you get like a 50% win rate, you end up dropping down the ladder because of the way that the system is built. So what I'm going to do next season differently is I'm actually going to, the first couple of weeks, all I'm going to do is experiment. I'm not going to worry about, I'm not going to bother climbing, because then you're in this position where you get anxiety and you're thinking, well, I don't
Mm.
play because if I play, I'm going to fall down the ladder, and I just did all that work for nothing. And I think that's really a shame. And I think that if I was a game developer, I'd be wanting to incentivize people to play with the cards, play with the different factions, and to experiment. And we talked a bit about that in episode 1, some of my suggestions for how they could do it. But some of those experimentations were really good fun. I actually opened Oberon. I actually managed to get a gold wild card, and I crafted Oberon. So I went back to my Imatech control, and I played about 10 games with that, and did pretty well. I made a deck guide about that if people want to see. And then I was looking at the Eldar, and like you, I was kind of like, okay, yeah, this is quite a balanced faction. It's pretty cool. What can we do? And I was looking through the late game stuff, and I'd already taken the Galen build, and I'd kind of dropped the end game and a couple of the other games, and I'd done the kind of Infinity Reclaim the Stars thing. And actually, to be honest with you, that's actually still now been my most successful Galen deck this season. But then I was looking at the Wraith Knight, and I was just looking at that huge monstrosity, thinking, I got to build a deck around this guy. This is just too cool. Like, I mean, let's be honest. He's a big, huge pile of slow,
I mean, yeah.
hot garbage. But I was like, if he actually lands and actually can do something, he's going to be pretty cool. So I basically built a Keltok deck, because what Keltok could do is like help me with hand management.
Mm-hmm.
So I could put the Wraith Knight back, or I could keep him or get the Infinity Stones. And then I was like, well, if I do the Infinity Stones reclaim the Stars combo, the Wraith Knight only suddenly costs 5 energy. Now we're talking, like that. And so I actually got something like it was very close to 50% win rate with this deck. I didn't play loads and loads of games with it, but I found it it's really difficult to navigate because there's a lot of moving parts in it. But the payoff. It's like I was quite ecstatic when I pulled it off and won with it. So it was pretty good fun. So I did that for a little bit, and then I built and then I went on to Nemesis, and I was like, I really want to try to do something to make Nemesis work. And I was like, why would anyone run Nemesis? Imatech and Oricon are so good. What would be the reason for running Nemesis? And I was like, well, he is like arguably the best tempo lord, right? Like, I don't know, I'm not sure, because you could argue that Imatech is, but arguably he's the best tempo lord because he does guarantee you a kind of body every turn. And then I was like, well, why would I want that body? It's not a very good body. Unlike Eldar, where they put a Storm Guardian down and it leaves a Spirit Stone, all Spirit Stones are valued the same, whereas Remnant tokens from Necrons are not all valued the same, right? A Lichguard Remnant token is worth way more.
Yeah.
Your opponent's going to do everything to kill that. Whereas a Necron Warrior, they're just going to go, well, I'll leave that Remnant token. If you want to waste your resources, BJ, rising up a Necron Warrior, I'll leave you to it, mate. But I was like, well, what? I've got to build a deck where there's got to be some reason for it specifically being a Necron Warrior. And that's where I got the idea with the Ghost Ship, because it was like, well, the Ghost Ship, even if we would play Ghost Ship and play that power, which often I would save the defense stratagem, which makes a discounted 2 cost, so I could play that, then play the Warlord talent, and that would give me essentially like 4 Necron bodies down on the table. And then obviously I went back to my old faithful, which is the Triarch Stalker, and the Triarch Stalker gives a bonus of is it +2 or +3? +2, right? Yeah, +2 to range attack. So those Necron Warriors actually have 3 range attacks, and now all of a sudden they've got 5. And that deck is pretty cool. I actually don't own the Resurrection Orb, but I've had quite a few comments and feedback on it, and I've kind of gone back and had a look, and I think the Res Orb might be very good in that deck.
I would agree. I just don't have it either.
I don't have it. Otherwise, I honestly would love to test that deck.
I'm missing that and Extermination, Annihilation Command.
And honestly, that deck is really good fun. The only thing that put me, it was going to be when I finished the Orcs, I was thinking I'm just going to play that and mainstay in that this season. But the main reason I haven't is because of Orcs, because of Will of Gork. Like, the whole point of that board is you build this like relentless board, and then they just Will of Gork, and you're just like, oh. But then that might be where the Res Orb could be good, for example, if I was to own it. So yeah, so I played a bit of that, and then I started to get a bit bummed out, to be honest, because I was sort of like, well, I'm like, I can only climb with Orcs, I can only maintain this ladder position with Orcs, but I want to experiment. And just very recently, I've gone back to Calgar. I'm, I'm loving this. I've just made a
Same.
thumbnail from a Calgar deck, and I've called it "Your Must Have Forgot" because he's like he's. I just like ran 8 games with him and got 7 wins. So I'm really happy with this Marine deck, and I'm going to release that as my next video.
Yeah, I
So
want to see how it differs from mine because I also released the Calgar like a day ago.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
really
I
want to
saw it.
see how different it is from mine. Don't spoil.
I won't spoil it. I think my thoughts on Calgar, just briefly, without completely spoiling the video, because I want people to go and check that as well. But I think what I've seen people do with Calgar is lean heavily into the vehicle synergy, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's correct. I don't think it's good enough. I
Mm-hmm.
think the late game vehicles are very good in Marines. You know, the Dreadnought and the 10 drop, I think is
Yeah.
really powerful. I think the early game vehicles are underpowered and that they're a bit of a trap. And so what I did is I said, well, okay, well, what if I just run the good stuff and the good stuff from my last season and like not kind of like try to force this synergy.
Yeah.
So for example, Chrono, is it Chrono, the 4
Yeah,
energy, the
Antara
legendary?
Cronus. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm running him, but I don't have tons of vehicles. You know, I'm running him almost like I run the Orc Nob in Orcs. I'm just like, he's a really good 4 drop. You know, if you get any bonus from him, fantastic. But I'm not gonna build a shit deck around that. So, yeah, I won't spoil it, but it is working quite well. And I'm having a bit of fun with him. I enjoyed the Ultramarine play, so I'm enjoying it. But I do hope that they revert some of the changes for sure. I think they went too far.
Yeah, I would agree.
They
They
went
did
too
some
far.
things very correctly, but did something. They overdid a few things.
Mm,
Like as I we did mention a couple of those in the last podcast. So
mm,
yeah, there are some things. There are some
mm.
things that I really wish that they could change as well. Like for example, since you mentioned the Wraith Knight, right? Some of these
Mm.
late game troops are like so cool. Like you got Avatar of Cain,
Yeah.
you got Iskandar Kaon and Kato Sikaris, and all of them are crap. So like you know what they could do? For most cards, for the most part, for most of these like card games, the main thing that makes cards work is either like something that grants instant value, like a rally, or something that grants value at the end of your turn. Like, let me give you a very good example. There existed this card in Horus Heresy Legions for Blood Angels, a Leviathan Dreadnought legendary Venerable Jophiel. So the card was basically 9 energy. I think 8-10 were the stats. It had front line and it had shield. So it was a pretty front line as a vanguard. So it was a very powerful unit. Its ability was that at the end of your turn, it would create a random Blood Angels Astartes in your hand. And every
Nice.
Blood Angels deck ran it. Afterwards, they changed the card. They removed the at the end of their turn ability and gave it some other ability that, like, for example, if a unit died beside it, it would give extra HP to adjacent units, let's just say like that. Instantly, everybody dropped it. So, like, the fact that something would grant instant value would be huge. Like, if they would change Iskandar Kaon's ability to, let's say, rally, choose a Black Legion's tactic and add it to your hand, and he could have like a passive, your Black Legion's stratagems cost like 1 less or something. It would be better than what it is right now, because right now it's kind of cheesy. You play it, if it
Mm.
survives, you can spam stratagems and it's RNG. Instead, you could have like something like that, or you could have like, let's say, when you drop it and it has a rally and an artifice, which would be like add a Black Legion psychic power to your hand or something like that on a rally would be very good. Because
Mm.
if right now as it is, it's very slow. Same with Kato Sicarius. Instead of what it has, it could have, let's say, rally do something, right? So in general, these rallies and at the end of your turns are what make units strong. And late game units not granting instant value are usually pretty bad because it's too slow anyway. So yeah, that's what I would like to see for sure.
Well, it's back to what we just said about the Marines, isn't it? Like the 8 drop Dreadnought and the 10 drop Land Raider,
They're
they both
great.
have an instant effect, and
Exactly.
that's why they're some of the very few late game units that are playable. You know, they're actually can be good.
Yeah, remove the repulsors rally and nobody plays it. So there you go. That's the thing.
Yeah, yeah. Hemlock, right? Hemlock's another one in the
Flank.
Eldari. It's the same thing.
I guess flank. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly, exactly. What do you think? just moving on a little bit to like they released a roadmap, didn't they? Where do we
Yes,
where
they
do we
did.
think the game where do we think the game is going? We're sitting here at the end of December. Well, I guess we're hoping for a January balance patch. I'm guessing they're going to do something early January to kind of address the balance. Um, but where do you think, like in the next, I don't know, 3 4 months, the game could go or might go? I'm just looking now at the news article that they shared, and it was very vague. It just kind of said that in Q1 alliances. So it just said the first quarter of 2024 will bring even more major features, in particular the alliances system. I have no idea what that is. And then they also said in Q1 a whole new faction will be released in the early year. And I've heard people talk about multiple factions, and I think they said that because the artwork that is on the the image that they shared of the roadmap shows like 4 different factions, but I don't. I'm not convinced because when if you just read what it says new faction, doesn't say factions, and then again in the description it says, moreover, a whole new faction will be released early next year. Which one will it be? Stay tuned to find out. That's it. So sorry, I'm setting up the question there, but where do you think this game's going? What do you think we need in the first quarter?
Okay, so alliances are 100% something that we do need.
Right.
Alliances would function, as I believe, similar to how lodges functioned in Horus Heresy Legions. This was basically like clan system. You have a couple of players who are in the same uh, clan, for example. Like there were like many different lodges. Like there were the Seekers, the Master Class, the Traitor's End. Like there were like so many different things there, right? There were like the Children of the Bald Mountains, whatever. Like there were like many different lodges that existed there, and there were certain players who were in these lodges, right? So, for example, let's say you have a lodge that you call, let's say, the Argent Crusaders or something. You're gonna have like 20 players there who are gonna be there. And what would happen is that apart from just being the same team and probably like working together, sharing decks and something on the Discord with on the private servers, one thing that would happen there would be that there was this special little thing. Just like there was a ranking system for player ranks, there was also ranking system for lodges. So what would happen is that when you won draft games, you received points for your team. And like what would happen is that each individual player that would take like 12 wins would grant like massive points to the team. If there was like 1 win or 2 wins, less points. And you also had the lodge rankings, like the player rankings. And what that would give was that together with, like, for example, the player rankings, there were also lodge rewards at the end of the season. And
Mm.
usually, if I'm not mistaken, if you were like in the top 5 lodges or something, you would receive a special crate that would guarantee include the new legendary card or something that was being released
Oh,
at
cool.
that point. So something like that, you know. So it was like very important. So
So how many lodges were there?
there were a lot, like there were super lot, but there were like some lodges that would stand out, like the fecund ones, for example, and masterclass and like seekers and stuff. Like there were like some lodges that were like on the
Yeah.
top of the
Do
top.
you create them as a player then,
You
or do
create
they
them as
create?
a player. Like I had mine
Right.
as well. I had mine as well, but mostly it was just like me and a couple of friends just for fun. But a
Yeah.
lot of lodges are focused ones. Like they actually
Mm.
did the thing. They would like agree when to farm the event, which event they were skipping because it cost like just like Blackstone, it would cost tickets. So that's a very important part of the game that they need to add like as soon as possible because it's going to create more feeling of um, like having a circle and something like that. So that's something that you will definitely want to do. Now, second thing about that is that I do believe that in Warpforge they'll probably bring some innovation with the alliances. So perhaps there's gonna be alliance wars and stuff like that which would be like super cool because almost all games have like clan wars and stuff like that. Like, why can't we have that in Warpforge? Like, there could be like alliance tournaments and stuff like that later. So that thing on the roadmap absolutely necessary. So alliances, for sure we need. For sure we need.
Mm.
Uh,
It's interesting. It's a new thing for me. I've not had that. We didn't have it in Gwent or Hearthstone or Runeterra
Yeah,
or Elder Scrolls, so it'll be a new experience for
it's
me.
a
I'm
very
looking
good
forward to
thing.
seeing what it's about. I still also feel a bit worried though because I'm like, sometimes like the developers. I'm not saying this is true of the alliances, but I'm saying sometimes the developers get an idea for a feature, and I just think, why are you investing time in that? There's like 10 fundamental things that you need to address, and you're not addressing them because you got this fancy idea. Again, I'm not saying alliance is one of those, but I just hope that you know they're focused on that. I really still strongly feel the ladder needs some reworking and some love. It's very dull, and the way even just the way it's presented, it's like there's just no it's like, oh, I'm legendary, am I? Okay, it's like there's
Yeah,
no there's no incentive around it. And again, the whole thing that I'm not going to keep going on about it, but the thing about like rewarding you playing multiple factions, I mean, that is like a huge lesson learned. I think I don't understand why people haven't taken that learning from Gwent. But anyway, the other thing they've got is the new faction, and obviously the big giveaway for me in the Discord is the fact that it says Tau. It already has a room in there, so I'm putting my money on this being Tau. I've heard people say maybe Imperial Guard, but why would their Tau thing be
it's
there in the Discord?
100% Tau.
I
Yeah,
think so.
you want me to reveal some spoilers that I dug up?
Go on.
Okay, so basically, you want the spoilers? Go on BJ's channel for part 2 of the podcast.